one thing I take pride in doing from this channel is to hold up mirror to the Western media and highlight their shortcomings when they err. And this conflict has provided me plenty of opportunity to do that. But sometimes it also becomes important to give them plaudits when they showcase objective and honest journalism. While this conflict has shown us the ugly side of the BBC and how publicly funded corporation is now in the firm grip of Zionists and genocide supporters, Sky News, a private media outlet, has just put its British rivals to shame with a great piece of journalism. Sky News has just released its investigative piece on brutal massacre of a 6-year-old Palestinian girl, namely Hind Rajab, along with her family members by the Israeli terrorists, supported by the US, the UK, the EU, Canada and Australia. Let me remind you what exactly had happened to Hind Rajab in January this year. Hind was trying to escape the bombing of Israeli terrorists with her family members on 29th of January when Israeli terrorists began to fire at her car indiscriminately. They killed all family members except Hind and her 15-year-old cousin, Lian Hamadeh. Lian desperately called Palestinian Red Crescent for help, as the chilling audio would show later. She was brutally killed by Israeli terrorists while she was seeking help from the Palestinian Red Crescent. You can hear in the audio that there is a loud gunfire while Lian is still speaking to members of the Palestinian Red Crescent, and suddenly her voice goes silent. Palestinian Red Crescent calls back on the number only for Hind Rajab to answer the phone because her cousin had been brutally murdered. You can feel the fright and pain in Hind Rajab's voice. I can't play these audios here because I suspect that YouTube will not like it and I'll be penalized. But you can hear them on my Telegram channel. Details are on the screen. This little angel, Hind Rajab, desperately kept asking Palestinian Red Crescent based in the occupied West Bank to come and rescue her. But she too was murdered by Israeli terrorists, also known as the IDF. It's been 10 months since those murders, but there has been zero accountability. There has been no consequences for the killers of Hind Rajab and her relatives. This matter kept coming up during the State Department's press briefings, but shameless Zionists in the department kept showcasing their shamelessness and utter sadism.
So perhaps this is a good follow-up here. It's been 184 days now since Israeli forces killed Hind Rajab, her family and medics sent to save her. Last month, when myself and other colleagues asked about the investigation into this, the department said Israel said that they're still investigating, and that Israel also said that the UN and Red Crescent did not respond to outreach from the Israeli government. I reached out to the Red Crescent, and they said that no, the Israeli government did not reach out. So has the Biden-Harris administration followed up on this alleged lie by the Israeli government, or sought to confirm any of Israel's claims on the half-year-old killing now of this girl and her family?
So we are in touch with our partners in Israel around the clock on a variety of issues. I don't have any specifics to read out as it relates to this conversation. I'm happy to check if there have been any additional updates, but to my understanding, this investigation is still ongoing, and I will leave it to them to speak to the details of it.
So I had reached out to the Israeli government as well, and while I was reaching out to the Red Crescent, they said they would get back to me with an answer, and that they did not after we reported the Red Crescent said that.
Well, it's really, I'm not a spokesperson for the responsiveness of another foreign ministry.
Given that, this government gives them billions of dollars in aid, I imagine that such claims want to be fact-checked?
So we will continue to engage with our partners in Israel. We ask them for additional information. We ask questions when we see incidents unfold, and we'll continue to do that. As it relates to this incident, I'm not aware of any updates, and I believe this investigation is ongoing.
Okay.
Now, Sky News has bravely pieced together the key information to conclusively prove that Israelis had deliberately slaughtered Hind Rajab and her family members. What's important here is that Sky News has chosen to use the word slaughter to describe Hind's murder by Israeli terrorists. This is huge. The wording matters. Since disgraceful BBC has chosen to surrender its objectivity by siding with the genocidal regime, a private TV channel has taken upon itself to finally highlight the Israeli crimes against humanity and Netanyahu's barbarism. Mind you, the same BBC had written a shameful piece to describe the brutal murder of Hind Rajab. You can see the headline on the screen by Lucy Williamson. That's how pathetic, that's how shameful this organization has become. Its downfall is beyond recognition. And nothing has changed. We criticize and it has zero impact on the bosses of the BBC because it continues to disgrace itself with more shady piece of journalism. First, it was Nicky Campbell yesterday exposing himself in a phone-in program. You can watch the video here. Then it was a Telegraph columnist registering her childlike tantrum on a BBC program saying that no one should disagree with her since she was a Jew. I'm not making it up. That's because a panelist had mentioned Israeli atrocities and how Israelis had raped Palestinians. This was unacceptable to this Jewish woman.
Because at the end of the day, advisors advise and politicians decide. And, you know, Dennis Skinner, I remember having a pop at Jeremy Hunt a few years back, said when posh boys are in trouble, they sack their servants. And there's an element of that here, obviously a middle-class boy rather than a posh boy perhaps. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, the problems that Labour has got are predominantly political. They are the winter fuel allowance, as Harriet just said. That is deeply unpopular. You look at Labour's polling, Keir Starmer's polling, Rachel Reeves' polling. It's all gone very sharply downhill since that. Their complete support, which I'm sure we'll get onto, for Israel's ongoing atrocities, which has obviously had an electoral impact as well. That is still having an impact in the polls. And, of course, the freebies row, which is not on the scale of the criminality, actually, we saw under the Conservatives, but is an irritant, especially when you see somebody on a six-figure salary getting lots of freebies when at the same time they're taking away £300 from people who are 80 years old, who might be on 11,000. So there are problems. They are not about advisors. They are about politicians' poor judgment.
I just have to jump in and say one of the major political problems with this government isn't ongoing support for Israel's so-called atrocities. It's the exact opposite of that support, but we'll get to that later. It is the total betrayal of a very important cause. Anyway, from an outsider's perspective, I think the Sue Gray, I can't let sort of actual.
All right, no, but as I say, we'll go. Now, hang on.
Actual.
So, committing war crimes or ethnic cleansing.
That's straight out of the Hamas playbook.
Zoe and Andrew.
That is ridiculous.
Andrew and Zoe, I've already said twice. No, I'm going to stop
I'm
you.
not going to be called Hamas. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous.
No, I am
it's absurd.
in charge of this programme, and we'll talk about it. We're going to come on to it next and try
so
and remember
that
it is a year on from the October 7th
and as the only Jew on the panel, I object to being shouted at by someone.
All right, we'll come on to it in a moment.
It wasn't. It didn't insult you.
Okay, just remember the optics.
Can you imagine her shamelessness? I'm the only Jew on the panel and I object to being shouted at. Wow. What is this supposed to even mean? Why should this shamelessness be even tolerated? But we are tolerating. This Zionist woman was so bad that even Joe Coburn, the show's host, herself an ardent supporter of Israel, had to correct her.
And unfortunately, the more secular, more democratic leadership of the Palestinian people was marginalised and wiped out in some cases. So, you know, we have to get back to a position where there are people capable of negotiating peace on both sides, by the way, because there is not in Netanyahu and his far-right cabinet either. I'm sorry, but people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir are no better than Nasrallah and the others.
Well, that's
and you look
clearly
at
false because they're not actually endorsing.
They are endorsing. Look what's going on in the West Bank.
With tunnels,
they are absolutely. And Shin Bet, the head of Shin
and
Bet.
torture and
hang on, Zoe.
Hang
on, Zoe.
Palestinian prisoners have been raped.
I agree that they're far.
Institutionalized.
Okay, this is a lot of fake news.
Hang on, don't talk over each other. But Zoe,
hang
on, Zoe. The two people that hang on. The two people that hang on a second. The two people that Andrew mentioned have been accused of encouraging and fueling division and violence in the West Bank.
But despite her shamelessness, this Zionist woman will continue to be invited on BBC and perhaps even be paid by your and my tax money called license fee. What level of shamelessness you have to achieve to deny that Israeli haven't been committing rapes or Smotrich and Ben Gavir have not been inciting violence against innocent Palestinians? Didn't we just see a protest by Israelis against the convictions of their soldiers for raping Palestinians? Who had convicted them? Wasn't it an Israeli military? The problem with these Zionists, like this Telegraph columnist, and supporters of genocide in and outside the BBC, is that they think we are still living in old Stone Age with no access to information. They're completely exposed now, and there is no denying this reality. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform on buymecoffee.com and Patreon. If you do think that this platform is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.